Welcome back. You're listening to Ask the CIO, sponsored by Sprinkler on Federal News Network. I'm your host, Jason Miller. My guest today is LaShonda Hodge, the Managing Director of Customer Experience for the Centers of Excellence at the General Services Administration. LaShonda, before break, we were talking a lot about this new framework you guys are piloting over a COE and a customer agency. And the one of the things that the framework does is addresses some of those longstanding challenges around customer experience, improving customer service, because you talked about governance, you talked about policy, and you talked about kind of accountability. But those are just maybe some of the process challenges. I imagine there's other challenges that you're starting to at the Centers of Excellence address, and what are those challenges and how are you addressing them?
Yeah, that's a great question. So while most, like I said before, most agencies, they love the idea of improving customers' experiences, there are these really big hurdles to actively and intentionally kind of improve customer experience at scale. So the first challenge that I generally see is, and I kind of talked about it a little bit earlier, is kind of this perception of competing priorities. Um, Leaders and staff tend to only focus on what they perceive as business needs and don't always coalesce around customer needs and actually use that to drive how the organization functions to also meet those business needs. So looking at the customer journey, but then also looking kind of on the back end at how the organization runs, that creates that journey for customers. It's called a service blueprint that we like to do to kind of help connect what customers are doing versus what the organization is doing to kind of inhibit and create those pain points that people often feel in their journey. So there's that, again, that belief that CX is something extra to be done, but when it's done right, everything you do should center around the customers. So instead of it being extra, it's just how you do business, why you develop processes in a specific way to achieve that optimal experience, why you build technology. And then thinking from that customer first perspective really reduces the burden on staff, and they will be more fulfilled because they're actually helping their customers. So CX has to be this investment from the top and the bottom. So leaders need to mandate it, announce it, and managers must be held to a standard, et cetera. So the second challenge that I often see is that leaders really have limited exposure to customers. Customers are more of this concept than a reality for many agency leaders. They don't interact with the public. They don't have regular or direct exposure to the voices of the people who depend on their agency services. And then customer research is limited for many agencies. Like I said before, even for agencies that have invested in research capabilities, these silos often hinder the development and distribution of meaningful insights across. And then there's always a lack of customer experience data, agile, civic design expertise in-house. Agencies tend to rent that expertise rather than buy it. So you've got contractors who have that expertise. Once they're gone, all that knowledge and all that great expertise walks out the door. So people with strong backgrounds in researching customers, analyzing customer needs, and designing with customers are only temporarily available to agencies. And it's even rare for agencies to kind of populate staff leadership roles with CX or design professionals. There's this unfortunate lack of agile and human-centered design capabilities in-house as well that allow for this more customer-focused and modern development needed to more rapidly respond to and better meet needs of the customers. And there's also a lack of data maturity, which is instrumental to design. Data about customers is siloed, and agencies, they often don't have that qualitative data to meaningfully connect with other disparate data to create this contextual picture of customer needs and how, when those needs aren't met effectively, they actually affect their operational metrics. One of the other things that we see, and it's unfortunate, and I feel like a lot of people actually do talk about this one, is the high technical debt that limits an agency's ability to really introduce or improve those digital services for customers. And sometimes there's little expertise in using modern technology. So there is a study or an article where it stated that about 3/4 of the money that the federal government budgets for IT actually goes towards maintaining legacy systems. The GAO had a report as well that said some critical systems are more than 50 years old, use outdated language, and have unsupported hardware and software. and are operating with known security vulnerabilities. And there was a study or an article by Accenture in a survey of 185 federal IT decision makers. 83% of the respondents said that technical debt severely limits their ability to innovate. So I know that's been a thing that people have talked about a lot lately, but I think it's really important and true that that technical debt is really kind of limiting the ability to kind of move into modern technologies. And then the last piece is kind of something that's intrinsic to government, which is organizational silos. It's definitely in the private sector as well, but it's very strong marker of what government looks like. And improving customer experience is nearly impossible if you have organizational silos, because customers neither know or care how agencies are structured, but the silos within agencies can have this direct and negative impact on the quality of the customer experiences. And unfortunately, but fortunately, improving customer experiences really is, by its nature, this holistic effort. So when you have silos, it's very difficult to collect complete information. It's very difficult to implement enterprise solutions. And so those silos really do make it difficult to make a cohesive and seamless customer experience that you might see in the private sector.
I want to take a half a step back to something you said, which is fascinating to me, that a lot of leaders don't either interact with customers, don't understand their customers, and don't really get their customers as well as maybe they should. Is that feels like that was a problem 15, 20, 30 years ago, but we talk so much about knowing your customers and what they need. And while we get nobody's perfect, the government's a large organization, you still see that time and again that the person in charge of project X or initiative Y says, our customers are these sets of people. And you go, well, what about I guess those people too. You know what I mean? You have that kind of realization. So you're shaking your head. Yes. Tell me more about what you see from a trend perspective about not understanding customers.
I think from a trend perspective, it appears that they do know that it's important. However, a lot of it is that they farm it out, right? Like, so it's the contractors are going to talk to people. And then when you bring them back in, the contractors back in to talk about what they've learned, they don't really have they weren't there during the process. So they haven't internalized these things. So it's much more difficult to empathize and internalize kind of those people that you're serving if you don't participate in the process. And so a lot of times it just comes to time and resources, right? They're very busy. And so they allow the contractors to go do the research, but they're not in the room when that research happens. And so I think kind of that inability to, like, because they're not there, they don't internalize it and allow that to be what guides them. They're using kind of cold insights from contractor staff.
And is that something that you're seeing maybe starting to change, or are executives going to that? You gave me, I saw that. You gave me the look of like, not really yet, but I was going to say, are these executives going to focus groups? Are they paying more attention to things like social media, where they're listening to the customers talk more openly, more candidly?
I think, well, I'm very hopeful in this kind of, as we continue to push towards customer experience, as COE continues to go into different agencies, that we can kind of impress on the executives that they have to be there. They have to hear people. They have to understand what they're going through. They have to find ways to make that time to really understand those customers of theirs. So I am very hopeful that will happen. From a social media perspective, I think that social listening is actually pretty new. And it's kind of a method, shall we say, that hasn't necessarily caught on at many agencies. I know that's one of the methods that we like to use in order to do work around designing new technology, designing new policy, designing new services, is really taking the time to do social listening around a particular topic, to to scrape as much social media data as we can possibly get, in order to really understand what people are saying, what the sentiment is around that particular topic. Are people happy? Are people not happy about that particular thing? What are they saying online? What are the patterns that we see? And so, again, I still feel like that information, it comes from contractors. They have the tools and technology to do that, whereas other agencies might not have invested in tools like that yet, to be able to do the work of scraping data from social media. But what I really like about social media is it just is unfiltered, right? Like, people go and they say whatever they need to say. And unfortunately, it's passive, so you can't kind of, you will have to go follow up to really understand the context and really understand what's happening in that situation. But it does give you this plethora of data that you wouldn't have necessarily gotten if they, if they don't interact with you on a regular basis, which is what happens in government. You don't interact with government agencies all the time, right? So being able to kind of talk about a topic unfiltered on social media, and for us to be able to use that information to really figure out, okay, where do we need to focus some additional research efforts, to really go and dig into what's happening here. So I think that this social media kind of social listening tool is really important for government agencies to kind of adopt as a method to hear the voices of their customers.
I heard a great story from a couple agencies who had how they use social media, and we're gonna take a break and come back and I'll tell you that story. So we're gonna leave people on a little bit of a cliffhanger, as they say. We're gonna take a break. My guest is LaShonda Hodge, the Managing Director of Customer Experience for the Centers of Excellence at the General Services Administration. I'm Jason Miller, and you're listening to Ask the CIO, sponsored by Sprinklr on Federal News Network.